Australia is expected to see a population boom as an extra 650,000 migrants enter the country this financial year and the next. But some aren't convinced we have the infrastructure in place to support new residents. The concern is an influx would tighten already burden the cost of living pressures on families, not to mention rents, not to mention the cost of buying a home. Joining me live now is independent member for Fowler Dai. I'm interested to see what your view of this is, Dai, because you're right in the heart of Western Sydney.
Good morning, Laura. Yes, I am indeed. And as we know, a lot of, over the years, the settlement of migrants and refugees have been kind of in our city of Fowler, which is Fairfield City area. A few years ago, about 10,000 of the 12,000 refugees who arrived were actually went to Fowler. Now, the issue with that is obviously the lack of services and the lack of infrastructure. We have, no homes been built, no new schools, no investment in our hospital. And so the numbers that we're hearing now, there's from 350,000 to 650,000 migrants coming in. We just don't know the actual figures yet. Now, I do understand that there is a workforce shortage, and I do understand the need for small business, such as one of my small businesses in my area, Bonrick Tyres, have had to close down temporarily because they don't have staff. So I understand the need to fill staff. But from my perspective, we can't just bring people in without providing the proper infrastructure to support that. And it's going to impact the cost of rent. And we know, we've got about a 1% vacancy rent in our electorate of Fowler, and it's going to really put pressure and it's going to increase rent. And of course, the public transport, we have inefficient public transport in our region as well. A lot of people drive cars, so what would that mean to our roads, the congestions? So there's a lot of issues here that I think the government has to really plan for before we actually just open the door.
Well, a lot of this is state government when it comes to housing and infrastructure in particular. We spoke before the election about some of those concerns. Now we know Chris Minns is Premier. Are you concerned about his plans for Western Sydney? Is it not enough?
Look, I know that he did not. He scrapped the Western Sydney Metro train line, and that is a concern whereby we are, projecting a growth in our region, and of course the Western Sydney Airport as well. And so, for me, there's a concern that there's no plan to even consider that metro line for us. And he did promise to invest $115 million into our Fairfield Hospital. So I will hope that he will fulfil that election promise. But I think that infrastructure is both state and federal. And I think we need to get all the three levels of government in Australia, local, state and federal, to work together to address housing shortages, to address the public transport, to address many issues. So I think it's time that we need to get all those levels of government to work together in order to address some of these, many of these infrastructure shortages and issues in our community.
Yeah, we've just seen the voice legislation introduced into Parliament, an impassioned plea really from the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus. But outside of Canberra, the good thing is that politicians don't get to decide whether this referendum passes or not, and there's a change in the Constitution. It's people who decide this. So in one level, the scare campaigns don't matter, but it will permeate the public. In your electorate, what are you picking up when it comes to the voice? Do you think there are concerns about it in your electorate? Are people not engaged? What is it?
Look, I think for many MPs, members of Parliament, I think if you go back into your community, depends on where you are. In Fowler, it's not a topic of discussion in my electorate. The main concern for a lot of our community members, of course, is the cost of living. Everybody's stopping me and asking me about, electricity prices, interest rates, and our hospital. Our hospital is such a big issue for our community. That is the front and centre of everybody's conversation on social media, etc. So it has not really featured in our Fowler electorate, where 70% of the population speak a language other than English. So obviously maybe they're not very much in tune with what's happening here in Canberra. We are in a Canberra bubble a lot of the time. And so, you know, we need to really connect back into that community and what's important to our people. And for me, when I go back there, a lot of the issues that we talk about there is actually not often what we talk about here in Canberra.
I fully understand that. I think that's happening in a lot of inner city and really across the country at the moment. People just aren't engaged in this conversation. But by the end of the year, everyone is going to have to vote. Once it gets to that point, how do you think it will go in Fowler?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I did bring up the issue in terms of languages for our community, and that if the government is going to try to educate our community around the importance of this legislation, that it's very important that there is material available in languages to our community and engage with them. So it is up to the government to really make sure that material is available across, obviously, the whole country, not just Fowler, but in particular in Fowler, in the southwest and western region, where there's a high population of non-English speaking population, that has to be taken into consideration.
Dai, always good to talk to you. See you soon.
Thanks, Laura.